The massive moss charger. People think of a meme, a joke of a boss fight. I mean, like, how could the MMC stand up to classics like the Mantis Lords or Grim? In the entirety of Hollow Knight, everybody considers it to be the worst boss in the game. But what if I told you that it's not the worst boss in the game, or even a bad boss? Okay, but like, it kinda is, but like, it's also very important. Let me explain. First, we have to understand the bosses that the player fights before it, being Gruzmother, False Knight, and Hornet. I'll do a brief analysis on each that I recommend to pay attention to in order to understand MMC better, starting with the Gruzmother. Gruzmother is a boss that follows a simple structure. Fly across the small arena, bounce off walls, and occasionally charge at the player. The boss tests the player's ability on positioning, as the small arena requires the player to find a spot where they can actually hit Gruzmother while avoiding getting hit, which can be difficult in a tight space. This skill comes into play a lot later on, with fights with tough arenas like bosses such as No Eyes, Markoth, and to an extent even Umu. False Knight is a boss that has a huge hitbox blocking the player's way, while having attacks that cover a huge area in front of them, more so than even a lot of bosses in the endgame. This boss tests the player's patience, as the huge hitboxes of the False Knight's attacks makes it risky for a player to play aggressive, so the optimal strategy for a new player is to wait for the boss to finish his attack, then rush in and get hits off. This skill comes into play in double bosses like Oro and Mato, as well as the Blobles, where rushing in is very risky, and it also comes into play with Umu again, I guess. Hornet is a boss that is small, but very nimble, that overwhelms the player with a barrage of simple but fast attacks. She tests the player's proactivity, as her attacks, while easier to dodge than that of False Knights, she throws them out much faster, making the player always be on their feet. This skill comes into play with more traditional bosses, like that of Broken Vessel, Hive Knight, and Trittlord, where the playstyle of kill them before they kill you, aka speed killing them, is the most optimal playstyle to defeat them. Now that we know what skills each of the prior bosses teach, let's move on to MMC. Massive Moss Charger is the first of many bosses, including many fan favorites, that follows a boss archetype that I like to call teleport bosses. The archetype is simple. The boss teleports into a random position and performs one of its attacks in its kit. Then, once it finishes its attack, they teleport out, being unable to be hit. They then teleport into another random position and repeat the cycle. Teleport bosses require the player to identify what attack the boss is using, then dodge accordingly, and then utilize as many windows to deal damage during their attacks. MMC is the first boss that teaches this. MMC has two simple attacks, a horizontal charge and a jump attack where he lands on the player. Both attacks can be somewhat tricky for a new player to avoid at first, as we're still only in Green Path. They likely haven't gotten a full grasp on the movement of the game, let alone the timings of MMC's attacks. However, the player had just defeated Hornet, and so has just unlocked the dash ability, which is perfectly built for avoiding MMC's attacks. This boss is made to help new players accomplish two things. One, train them into using the dash ability more during combat, and two, train them into learning pattern recognition, the main skill that MMC teaches, as this will be an incredibly important skill to have in order to defeat the hardest bosses in the game, since a large majority of them are teleport bosses. Now unfortunately, with all that being said, this doesn't make MMC a particularly great boss on its own. It's repetitive, has low health, has several counterplay options, is a joke for most players after they get decently skilled, but it being easy is okay, as it increases the player's skill set, teaching new players the last of the four major skills in Hollow Knight boss battles: patience, positioning, proactivity, and now, pattern recognition. The boss gets memed on a lot, but it's actually very important for new players, especially those who are new to the Metroidvania genre. It teaches unique skills that no other boss before it in the game teaches, and gently trains them for the future bosses in Hollow Knight. And mind you, one of the most likely bosses the player is to encounter next is the beloved teleport boss, the Mantis Lords, who I truly believe a lot more new players would get confused on how to handle if they weren't eased into the teleport boss formula. Also, like, how the hell is MMC the worst or easiest boss in the game when you have bosses like Zero or even Gorb, or God forbid the Venge Viking? Regardless, thank you all for watching and I hope to see you again.